continue our coverage of the unfolding crisis in Ukraine tonight. And of course, it comes as that country facing an invasion on multiple fronts from Russia, land, sea and air. Let's take you to Kyiv in Ukraine, the country's capital. We're joined by journalist Adil Bradlow. Adil, it seems like we've got you up on a better line, and in fact it might be the best place to start. Of course, we're already seeing that network disruptions have been registered when it comes to the supply of connectivity in parts of Ukraine, and some of the government systems coming under attack and software being used seemingly to wipe out data. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I know that the Ukrainians have come under sustained cyber attacks for the past 8 years, really, on and off. And then in the build-up to today, there have been a couple of cyber attacks. Last week, the Ministry of Defense was hit with a cyber attack. And then last night, the banking system and the government websites were all down with a denial of service attack. But I think the communication system has actually been pretty functional today. I mean, mobile systems have been working, electricity is still on. It's all part of the sort of hybrid warfare that the Russians are engaging in right now, the multiple fronts. But I think what shocked everybody, was the scale of the attack today. Nobody was anticipating the full occupation of Ukraine, which is clearly right now underway.
And it's some of the reflections that were shared by President Zelensky earlier on in the day, saying people were ultimately woken up to the sound of shelling. Speak to us a bit of what it was like being in Ukraine when that happened.
Yeah, I was lying in bed around 5 o'clock in the morning, and I heard a couple of thuds, and I thought, nah, can't be. And then the phone started buzzing, and we had Beijing on the phone. I'm working for the Chinese at the moment. We had Beijing on the phone, and I thought, oh my God, here we go. And there was like continual missile strikes. Basically, it was the early morning strikes were characterized by cruise missiles, basically hitting tactical targets, air defense systems, military communications, that kind of thing. And a couple of them were quite close to our hotel, so we decided we were going to try and hit the road to the Polish border, to the town of Lviv. But we spent 9 hours in the car today, as hundreds of thousands of residents of Kyiv also try to leave. And in the end, we just gave up and came back to Kyiv, and we just got back a little while ago. It's manic. I've never seen so many people on the road. I mean, the whole city was on the move.
Of course, that's a great juxtaposition when you look at people trying to flee the city. And on the other hand, we have a president that's pleading on people to stay put, and those who can, to get involved and help defend their country.
No, there's no shortage of people willing to defend the country, that's for sure. I mean, the Ukrainian forces they announced a call-up of all reservists, and Ukrainians were flocking to the call-up centers. And they've been arming themselves. I mean, over the last month or so, they've relaxed the gun laws here. So a lot of Ukrainians have been buying automatic weapons and have been in training camps. They have every weekend, they have special training camps where, women go to learn first aid and knife fighting and all sorts of stuff. I mean, and also automatic weapon usage. So it's been it's been building. But to tell you the truth, I never thought it was going to happen. I was skeptical. I mean, every time the Americans told us, oh, tomorrow it's war, and, I just thought it wasn't going to happen. And then this morning, the drumbeat of war was definitely picking up. And after Putin's speech the other day, where he sat there and rambled about the fact that Ukraine is not a real nation and that basically they're Russian and they have no right to exist, sounded just like Adolf Hitler and his whole Lebensraum and the Deutsche Blut und Land and all that kind of stuff. It was crazy. Then I thought, okay, this guy's unhinged. And, I think basically this thing may be on. And sure enough, today they went all out. I mean, there's fighting right outside Kyiv at the airports, Mariupol airport and the military airport. Russian paratroopers were dropped in. So I expect them to be in town by tomorrow.
And what does that mean for somebody like you, Adil, and the rest of the residents who are still in the capital tonight?
Well, the residents are in a slightly different position to us. I mean, we're here to work. So for me, we'll try to do what we can to cover the story. For the residents, the safest thing for them to do is to hunker down, get some supplies, and just basically sit it out, because these first 24, 48, 72 hours are the most dangerous. And if I was not working as a journalist, that would be my plan, would be to basically have a place where if artillery or airstrikes come in, I have a place to go down into a bomb shelter and spend my time down there, and just make sure I got enough food and water to get through the first 3-4 days of this thing.
And have you been seeing that today, an increase in people trying to get supplies, or had that happened already?
From early this morning, people were trying to draw money from the banks off to the supermarkets. You saw people walking around with carrier bags full of food. You saw them with their little roller bags where they're heading off to the shelters. They're going to go live in the shelters for the next couple of days. All that stuff is going on. But most people, because a lot of people still have links to the countryside here, so they're basically trying to flee. And we were heading west towards Poland. And, I mean, with 9 hours, we didn't even manage to get out of Kyiv. And we left early. We were on the road by 8:30 this morning. And basically at 4 o'clock this afternoon, we gave up.
One of the professors that we spoke to earlier in the program tonight, Adil, suggested that when it comes to the responses to the situation and the comments by Vladimir Putin around demilitarizing and denazifying Ukraine, that part of that would also mean a targeting of activists, perhaps even of journalists that were seen as problematic. Perhaps if you can describe for me what the Ukrainians themselves understand of those comments.
Well, I mean, these are the comments of an unhinged lunatic. He's completely lost the plot. The denazification. I mean, there were Ukrainians who joined the Nazis during World War II, and there are right-wing elements here, but most Ukrainians are democratically orientated, looking towards Europe for their future. I mean, this is the narrative that Putin is spinning for the audience back home. This is not meant for us. This is for Russians. Russians are meant to take this in. And they're basically subjected to a single narrative, because basically media has been destroyed, and independent media has been destroyed in Russia. So they don't really have the options. And many Russians believe that that the Ukrainians have been waging a genocidal war against the separatists in the Donbass. And while there were issues in the beginning, I mean, while the interests of Russian speakers were not taken into account properly after the 2014 revolution, Putin never really gave it a chance. And this is the result of that.
Adil, we also have many Russians who've got family links in Ukraine and vice versa. Give me a sense of what people in those positions have been saying in the midst then of this conflict.
Reasonable Russians you talk to in Moscow, I've been reading online, they're horrified by this war. They're saddened by it. They don't want to go to war with Ukraine, because Ukrainians are their brothers. And many Ukrainians have married Russians and live in Russia, and many Russians have married Ukrainians and are living in Ukraine. I mean, the two societies in the Soviet era, they were integrated. And this is part of the problem that Putin is using. He's using this integration that was part of the Soviet culture to justify his new, greater Russian expansion.
Adil Bradlow, we're going to leave it there then for tonight. He is a journalist live to us out of the capital of Ukraine.